Imagine a massive swimming pool. Now imagine filling it with every single drop of fresh water on the entire planet. Now do that twice. That is exactly how much water China has moved across its territory in the last 20 years. It is the largest rearrangement of nature ever attempted. They didn't just build a canal, they bent the geography of a continent to their will. They moved an entire river, thousands of kilometers, crossing over mountains and tunneling under other rivers, all without using a single pump. But here's the mystery. Why would a country spend $80 billion, 10 times the cost of the Panama Canal, just to move water? The answer lies in a crisis so invisible and so terrifying. It was literally swallowing the foundation of the Chinese economy from underneath. By the end of this video, you'll see why this project is the blueprint for the 21st century's most valuable resource, and why the most impossible part of the story hasn't even begun yet. To understand this project, you have to understand a simple, brutal fact. China has 20% of the world's people, but only 7% of its water. And that water is in all the wrong places. The south is drowning in floods, while the north is dying of thirst. In Beijing, 21 million people were living with less water per person than the citizens of Saudi Arabia. For decades, the north survived by sucking water out of the ground, but they were doing it too fast. Imagine the ground beneath northern China as a giant bathtub. For 50 years, everyone had their own straw, sucking water out of that tub. Eventually, the water ran out, but the straws didn't stop. They started sucking out the very moisture that held the earth together. The ground literally began to sink. In some parts of the North China Plain, the earth has dropped by more than 2 meters. Buildings cracked, bridges shifted, farmers dug wells hundreds of meters deep, only to find nothing but dry dust. China was facing a day zero for 400 million people. They didn't just need a canal. They needed to perform a massive continent-wide blood transfusion. The solution was the Central Route. It starts at the Danjiangkou Reservoir, a man-made lake so large that, to expand it, China had to relocate 345,000 people. That's like moving the entire population of Iceland to build a single dam wall. From there, the water has to travel 1,432 kilometers to reach Beijing. But here's the engineering miracle that sounds impossible. The water flows the entire way using nothing but gravity. Think about how precise that has to be. The reservoir is 170 meters above sea level. Beijing is 50 meters. Over a distance of 1,400 kilometers, the water only drops about 10 centimeters for every kilometer it travels. Imagine trying to roll a marble down a hallway that is a mile long, but the floor only tilts by the thickness of a few coins. If the tilt is too steep, the water crashes and destroys the canal. If it's too flat, the water stops and turns into a stagnant swamp. To keep this marble rolling, Chinese engineers had to carve a path through 1,400 kilometers of obstacles with surgical precision. They couldn't let a single hill, a single valley, or a single highway get in the way. They built over 2,000 bridges and aqueducts, creating a sky river that carries tens of billions of tons of water over the heads of farmers and motorists. But then, they hit the ultimate boss, the Yellow River. The Yellow River is the mother river of China. But for engineers, it's a nightmare. It's thick, it's muddy, and it flows directly across the path of the clean Yangtze water. You can't mix them. It's like trying to run a pipe of clean drinking water through a muddy sewer. You have to keep them separate. The solution was a feat of engineering that feels like science fiction. They decided to go under it. They used massive tunnel boring machines to carve 2 giant tubes, 7 meters wide, deep beneath the riverbed. While the wild yellow current of the mother river rages above, the clean blue water of the south flows silently through these tunnels just a few meters below. It's a river, flowing underneath another river. Imagine the pressure, millions of tons of water and silt pushing down from above. One tiny crack, one weak seal, and the entire project would be buried in mud forever. But the tunnels held. Today, those silent tubes are the only reason 70% of the water in Beijing's taps exists at all. If the Central Route was a challenge, the Western Route is a war. China wants to move water from the Tibetan Plateau, the roof of the world. We are talking about an elevation of 4,500 meters. The air is so thin that workers need oxygen tanks just to breathe. The temperature stays below freezing for most of the year. To make this work, China will have to drill tunnels through the Himalayan mountains that are over 100 kilometers long. To put that in perspective, the longest tunnel on Earth right now is 57 kilometers. China wants to double that, at an altitude where machines freeze and the Earth is constantly shifting with earthquakes. Why do it? Because whoever controls the water of the Tibetan Plateau controls the water tower of Asia. It is the ultimate strategic high ground. There is a saying in China, we do not ask if it can be done, we ask when it will be done. This is the part of the story that is still being written, the part that will define the next 50 years of human engineering. What China learned here is now their most powerful export. From Egypt to Pakistan, countries are looking at their own drying rivers and realizing that adapting to nature isn't enough anymore. They need to rewrite the map. In the 20th century, power was measured in barrels of oil, but you can't drink oil. In the 21st century, the nation that can move a river across a continent is the nation that writes the rules. While the rest of the world debates how to save water, China has decided to move it. They didn't wait for the rain to fall in the north. They chose to bring the river to the people. But a project this big always has a shadow. The 345,000 people who lost their ancestral lands. The fish species in the Yangtze that are struggling because their home has been diverted. The 500 billion yuan debt that will take generations to pay back. This isn't a clean story. It's a messy, expensive, and controversial battle against nature. But for the 400 million people who no longer have to fear day zero, the price was worth it. The rivers of China used to be defined by where they wanted to go. Today, they go where they are told. If this changed how you think about the future of our planet, hit that subscribe button. The Western Route is coming, and it will be the most insane construction project in human history. We'll be here when the first drill hits the rock. Now, I have a question for you. If your country was dying of thirst, and China offered to build this entire system for you for free, but in exchange they would control the on-off switch for the next 50 years, would you take that deal? Yes or no? One word is enough. I read every single one.